9 of Miscellaneous. Today we're going to be doing part 4 of my little mini-series on the greater male variability hypothesis and hypergamy. So we've previously gone into hypergamy, we've been through the game theory behind it, and we've looked at some actual real-life examples of how it manifests in the world. So today we're going to be looking at some real-life examples of the greater male variability hypothesis and some of the literature behind it. So just to clarify on it a bit, so with the greater male variability hypothesis, the two genders are still going to have the same average. That's an important part to it, is they need to have the same average, so that if there is greater variability, when you select from the higher ends of that variability, it can pull the whole lot of it upwards. It's like being a rock climber, where you randomly throw your arms around and then you pick whichever arm is higher up, and then you can pull your way up using that arm. And so you wave your arms around and then grab and pull up, and it'd be a very bad way of climbing a wall, but you'd climb it eventually. So I suppose this is about the point where we need to start talking about normal distributions. So one of those bad boys with your average, which I don't know, let's say for IQ is 100. So with the greater male variability, if that there was a graph of the average of the population, with females exhibiting less variability, the female line would look more like this. It'd be much higher towards the middle, and the male one would look more like this. Lower to the middle, but you get fatter ends, both at the bottom and at the top end of it. So I suppose now is as good a time as any to dive into some of the literature behind, and then we'll get back to this afterwards. Just keep it in mind. Start off with Wikipedia, why not? The variability hypothesis, also known as the greater male variability hypothesis, states that males display greater variability in traits than females do. It has often been discussed in relation to cognitive ability, where it has been observed that human males are more likely than females to have either very high or very low intelligence. The sex difference in the variability of intelligence has been discussed since at least Charles Darwin. And, if you talk about evolution, that's about as far back, really, as you can go. Sex differences in variability are present in many abilities and traits, including physical, physiological, and genetic ones. It is not only found in humans, but in other sexually dimorphic species as well. So dimorphic is when there's, two distinct genders. Or, it's 2019, let's not be a bigot, 576 distinct genders, although that's not dimorphic, that's probably like pentacentenarian something morphic species, but that's a video for another day. Let's quit that. So, what is this? On Hill's work, Greater Male Variability Hypothesis. The paper itself is quite dry, and the following quote is its main thesis. Let's just cut straight to that. In a species with two sexes, A and B, both of which are needed for reproduction, suppose that sex A is relatively selective, i.e. will mate with only a top tier, less than half of B candidates. That's hypergamy. What they've described in there is a very important part of it, because greater male variability goes hand in hand with hypergamy. The two are required for each other to exist. So, I don't know, let's get rid of this. So, population of A, population of B. Okay, what does he say? suppose that sex A is relatively selective, i.e. will mate with only a top tier less than half of B candidates. None of that. Then from one generation to the next, among subpopulations of B with comparable average attributes, those with greater variability will tend to prevail over those with lesser variability. So, if you randomly pick someone from B, the ones with a bigger chance of going either up or down are going to have a better chance of ending up in the top than the ones that have a smaller chance of going up or down. So, this goes back to the fact that, genetic mutations don't know what or why they're mutating. They're just random genetic mutations. So, the only direction it has is that people, or males who have a higher chance of having a bigger genetic variability, those will make up the majority of the people who fall into the top of, group B, as it is there. They will also make up the majority of the people at the bottom, but they die out. So we don't care about them because those genes that failed don't get passed on. But at the same time, those are the same genes that are more likely to succeed. The ones that don't move as much, they're more likely to center around the middle, which basically means that they're going to be outperformed by the ones that are at the top. It makes sense. Conversely, if A is relatively non-selective, accepting all but a bottom fraction, less than half of the opposing sex, then subpopulations of B with lesser variability will tend to prevail over those with comparable means and greater variability. So basically what that's saying is if this line here is further down, let's say if it selected all of it, if they weren't so picky, if there was less hypergamy in that population, the ones that have smaller variation are going to occupy a lot more of this area around here. And the ones with smaller, if there's less hypergamy, that means the ones that are way up here at the top, yes, they're still going to be at the top, but they're not going to be so disproportionately successful as opposed to, the examples that we were looking at where it was like 1 in 17 men, were able to reproduce. That's some pretty selective. This is talking about less than half. 1 in 17 I think is a little bit less than half, This mathematical thesis is supported in the paper by computational simulations and mathematical proofs. Say I've done a bit of that. From this, one can get the greater male variability hypothesis if one assumes that A, human males are less selective in their choice of human females when choosing to mate. Go to a nightclub at 4 a.m. on a Saturday night and you tell me whether or not males are picky. Yeah. And B, traits that drive variability in intelligence and are intergenerationally heritable, whether biologically or culturally. Oh, look, can be either. Doesn't just need to be biological. While not uncontroversial, neither of these are crazy ideas. In fact, they weren't both widely accepted, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. Yeah, anyway, so let's go on and look at some other examples. And we've got this here. This is from Heterodox Academy. So this is Jonathan Haidt, and he's a very, very clever man. Populations have significant overlap. I really like that. That I'm going to use in something at some point. But they do a really good job of describing, this overlap of the two distributions. So, that's what it would look like. Same average, the same mean for the two populations, that green part there is women, where it's slightly higher in the middle, but then when you look down at the far ends, you end up with men who are, disproportionately represented. I mean, do you really care about what that graph looks like? What does that look like in the real world? Oh, actually, wait, hang on. Before we look at what it looks like in the real world, we found greater variance by Levine's test of homogeneity of variance amongst boys at every age, except age 2. Despite the girls' mean advantage from ages 2 to 7, girls are significantly overrepresented as measured by chi-square tests at the high tail and boys at the low tail at ages 2, 3 and 4. So between the ages of 2 and 4, girls are better than boys. Girls are just smarter than boys in those, toddler and small child ages. By age 10, the boys have a higher mean, greater variance, and are overrepresented in the high tail. Sex differences in variance emerge early, even before preschool, suggesting that they are not determined by educational influences. So to anyone saying that, this is caused by, boys are encouraged to do STEM, subjects, and therefore that's why this happens. No, because it happens before even school. So, screw you. Here you go. This is what it looks like in the real world. The Nobel Gender Gap is worse than you think. What do you think the Nobel Gender Gap is? I mean, you've got to keep in mind, the Nobel Gender Gap is when we're talking about people who have reached the absolute peak of scientific exploits, the most renowned scientists. So, I mean, if we're looking at this sort of difference for 4 standard deviations, 4 standard deviations of the world is still going to be a couple of tens of thousands of people. We're talking about all the way when you get down to 20 people, 5 or 6 standard deviations. Here we go. Since 1901, 20 women, 3.29%, have received Nobel Science Prizes compared to 587 men. The gender divide is slightly more pronounced when looking at prize share. Women have received 2.77% of the prize share as compared to 97.23% going to men. So, yeah, men wildly overrepresented in Nobel Prizes. Let me grab this. We're going to do a little experiment, right? So here's our average. This here is going to be our standard deviation for women, much more heavily skewed towards the center. Here's our one for men. This is wildly exaggerated over what the actual slope of the lines are, but, we'll use this for now. Okay. Come on, get closer. So, where would you put a Nobel Prize on here? Nobel Prize, somewhere up here. What do we expect? Crap. We expect to see a hell of a lot more men than women, all the way up at that end. Let's look at another one. Just 24 female CEOs lead the companies on the 2018 Fortune 500, fewer than last year. Where would you put CEOs on this graph? How smart do you need to be a CEO? I'd say, somewhere around here. What do you know? That is well within the area where men outperform women. There you go. Let's look at, just to work out where a whole bunch of different things would be. What have we got here? Experts have worked out which majors have the highest IQ. Let's look at the rest of these on here and see whether or not they fit in basically exactly where we would predict them to be. Okay. Physics and astronomy, 133. physics. Do you expect physics to be, severely overrepresented with the amount of men? I do, yeah, absolutely. Maths and science, philosophy, materials engineering, economics, chemical engineering, other engineering, mechanical engineering. Why so many engineering? Just engineering. Engineers fall well in the area where you can expect it to be like a 3-to-1 ratio. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to link this in the description. I'm also going to link next to it because I don't have it now, but I'm going to find for you a list of, the gender disparity for basically the same courses. I mean, it might not be the same list, but you'll be able to, cross-reference between them at your own leisure. You're going to find that there's, if you use the greater male variability and you compare this list to the gender disparity in these courses, I can guarantee you it's going to match up almost exactly. Chemistry, blah, 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 computer and information science, civil engineering, industrial, even more engineering. English language or literature is about 120. 120 is about here. So that's where you get English lit. It's lit. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that again. I apologize. Art, history, theory, critical theory, political science. So what happens below that? History, architecture, library and archival science, social sciences. So social. Oh, by the way, also, you see what happens when we go past here? We start going into the area where women are overrepresented. Let's zoom in a bit. Yep, so what else have we got here? Arts, performance studios, sociology, psychology, communications, health and medical sciences, education. I have 2 sisters who are in education. My mum is in education. There is a lot of women who study teaching. The majority of them, like men, are endangered species as far as teaching goes. So yeah, education. God, the amount of girls I know who went to Notre Dame Uni studying teaching and nursing is absolutely astronomical. What else have we got here? Social work, early childhood education, student council. Yeah, these here, I mean, maybe I'm just sexist, but all of those there strike me as the sort of subjects that women dominate in universities. Now, you could have your attitude of saying, well, look, these are all, the bottom tier of university subjects. How come women are all doing the dumb uni subjects? It's like, well, they're all higher than the average IQ. Women are overrepresented at the lower end of the higher end of IQ. Women are also overrepresented at the higher end of the lower end of IQ. This section down here. And that sort of brings up a funny thing that happens, right? So you've got these 2 lines, and you've got this mean. Now what this means is that if you have... If you're looking for a particular type of, activity that's exhibited by people... Oh, sorry. There you go. So if you're looking for a particular type of activity that is exhibited by someone, and you're looking for, something that is a low IQ activity, and you're looking for people below that. So let's say, criminal behavior. That's, a low IQ activity and lower. So if I think it's something like, if you've got an IQ below 80 or something like that, the chances of you being a criminal just accelerate rapidly. Down here, or ending up in prison. Down here, as soon as you go past 100, and you're looking for something below that point, it'll be overrepresented with men because of this bulge here. As soon as you decide to go under 100 and look lower, mostly men. So, let me see, under 100, going lower, will be mostly men. So, criminals, crime. On the other hand, what else is something that you don't need to have, you can achieve with a lower than average IQ? What about finishing high school? High school. What sort of IQ do you need to finish high school? It's not 100. It'd be much lower than 100. I bet you could finish high school with an 80 IQ. So if you've got an IQ of 80 and you're looking for people above that, that's going to include this major bulge of women at the top here. The majority of men are down here. Majority of women are in here. Majority of men up here. So if you're looking for high school, which is an activity that is lower than 100, and you're looking for above that, there's going to be a majority of women. Don't believe me? Hang on. We can bring up Australian Bureau of Statistics. If you want to doubt these statistics, good luck to you. More girls than boys staying in school. In 2018, the proportion of all students staying in school in Year 12 was 85%. Male students had lower rates than female peers at 81%. That means that 89% of women finish high school. Where is 81%? Yeah, somewhere around there would, on a properly drawn distribution, somewhere around there would be where you capture 81% of the population. And because you get that big bonus, chunk of women in there, and that section of men that are underneath, yeah, it's going to be overrepresented with women. It's still consistent, Why do we have the majority? So, that's under 100. So what happens if you're talking about over 100? If you're looking for an activity that involves being above that line. So, let's say here is the cutoff for being a CEO. You're going to get a majority of men. CEOs, managers. Not mid-level managers, but yeah. And I was trying to think up of an example of what something is where you need to be lower than a high level of intelligence, but I honestly could not think of an example. But I can guarantee you that women would dominate in it. I can't think of what that example is. If you can think of it, please feel free to link it in the chat. But if you can think of something that requires like a 130 IQ or lower, majority of women. Or you could be really sneaky and just say, well, to not become a CEO requires an IQ lower than 130. And there you go. Majority of women. So basically anything you choose, if you pick a point on here and you want to select a proportion that's further away from the mean, like from the average, it's going to have a majority of men. If you pick a line and you want to pick the area that goes over the mean and to the other side, it will have a majority of women. That's just how it is. Anyway, so this has been fun. I hope I've done, a significantly good job of explaining the whole concept of the greater male variability to you, and, maybe we now see a bit how greater male variability and hypergamy, they mesh incredibly well. They are two undeniable facets of human behavior, or, the human experience. It explains a hell of a lot of what you see in the world, and greater male variability in particular will explain a hell of a lot of what you see in the schools and, in the workplace. Which kind of leads you to the question of, is there CEO gap really a problem? Is the gender wage gap really a problem? Does it really exist? That's a video for another time, but for now, I hope you've enjoyed this one, so I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. It might be the one on pork barreling, maybe. Yeah, maybe. It's election season. We'll do that. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.